Hi, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Q&A is open. Feel free to hop on in there, say hi. Let me know where you're from. How was your weekend? Nice to be back. How was my weekend? Oh, I got that massage and it was lovely. It was lovely. Hadn't been. I looked it up. Hadn't been since February, so it was much needed. What did you do over the weekend? Tell me all about it in the Q&A. Share where you're from, what you did over the weekend, anything else you feel like sharing. Hop on in there and let me know about it. All right, UK is here, North Carolina, Texas, Indiana, Washington State, Brooklyn, Scotland, Minnesota, California. 4 different music gigs over the weekend. That sounds so busy. Surrey, UK. Some apple picking. That's always fun. Virginia Beach, Indianapolis. Some more UK, Puerto Rico. Doing lots of work. We got our Florida people cleaning up from the storm. How is everyone doing? Are we all okay? Tell me all about it. How is it going? Alabama, Wisconsin, Vancouver, St. Louis. Has anyone seen the Wild Robot movie? It was so great. Made me cry and laugh. I have not seen it. You know what? I stream like Netflix and those kinds of things. And because of that, I oftentimes don't see commercials anymore. And then I don't know about any movies that are coming up. I'm sure I am missing out on a lot of things. I don't doubt it. Grand Rapids, Michigan is here, St. Louis, Albuquerque. Someone went to their first concert over the weekend. That's awesome. California, Southern Wisconsin, Edmonton, Alberta, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Texas, Sacramento, Columbus, Ohio, Corpus Christi, Texas. For those of you just joining us, welcome. We'll get started in just another minute. Q&A is open. Feel free to hop on in there, say hi, let me know where you're from. What did you do over the weekend? I got a massage. Hadn't had one all year long. And it was nice. It was appreciated. It was excellent self-care. I also learned I need to stretch more. I guess I didn't learn that. I already knew. I already felt it. But it's nice to have a reminder that I need to be doing it. Indiana, spent the weekend moving. That's always a bit stressful. Dayton, Ohio, Sault Ste. Marie, New York, Pennsylvania, South Africa, Texas, Moose Lake, New Brunswick, Idaho, Texas, Vancouver Island, New Jersey. Didn't have such a great weekend. I'm sorry to hear that. That's always tough. Texas, Iowa. We had some Oktoberfest celebrations. Maryland, Connecticut, British Columbia, Michigan, Louisiana, Nova Scotia, some more Vancouver Island, Greece, Philadelphia, UK, Portugal is here, Saskatchewan, Idaho, South Africa. Had a wisdom tooth extracted. Never fun. For those of you in Florida, thanks for sharing that you're safe, your families are safe. It's so important to me. I know that was devastating for so many people. All right, so as much as I would love to chat all hour long, let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about work stress as well as burnout. And this is brought to you by MindSpring Mental Health Alliance with a special thanks to the United Way of Central Iowa for partnering with us and sponsoring today's webinar. So everyone's mics are muted, cameras are off, Q&A feature is on. If you have questions, hop on into that Q&A, send them over to me. I'll check questions as we go through each section. If you ask a question that I know I can answer in a future slide, I'm going to hold off until we get there. And I'm going to save a little time at the end for questions and answers. We'll end in about 55 minutes, so I will just keep answering questions as long as time allows. Now, we do have 700 friends joining us right now, and over the next couple of minutes, we usually get another 100 or so more. And I bring that up as to why I may not be able to get to all of the questions. So please don't be offended or take it personally if I don't get to yours. We just simply ran out of time. Now, we do have closed captioning available. Go to the bottom of your screen and look for that CC button. Give it a click. We'll turn captions on. Click it again, and it'll turn them off. And then for anyone that is new, my name is Jamie. I am a licensed master social worker, but I'm not here doing these webinars with all of you. I'm a therapist. Prior to that, I worked in housing. I worked heavily in child welfare, working with kids and teens that had experienced some abuse or neglect, many of them being part of the foster care and adoption system. Now let's go over our frequently asked questions. This is being recorded, and everyone who registered for today's webinar will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording in it. Along with that email, we'll also be sending you links to the resources we talk about today. No slides will be sent out. And we do offer certificates of attendance. So everyone who registered for today's webinar and joined the live session will receive an email from certificates@mindspringhealth.org soon after the webinar ends. Complete the webinar follow-up survey that's linked in that email to receive your certificate. Now, certificates are not available for anyone who's only watching the recorded version of the webinar later on. And CEUs are not provided for community education webinars. All right, so what are we going to learn? First, we're going to talk about what stress is. I mean, yeah, we all kind of know what stress is, but we'll go into a little more detail. And then we're going to identify some of the more, common stress triggers. We'll go over how stress can impact our health, and then some practical tips for managing stress, as well as some self-care activities. So here's a quote I like. You cannot always control what goes on outside, but you can always control what goes on inside. And really, what we're talking about here is stress is unavoidable and out of our control sometimes, but we can learn to control our response to it. And so stress can be defined as any type of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. A stressor is anything that we have to adjust or respond to. And our bodies respond with physical, mental, and emotional reactions to the stress. The human body is designed to experience stress and react to it. Stress causes our bodies to respond, and this stress response helps us to survive, change, and grow in the environment. Now, in 2020, the world's workers reached an all-time high from experiencing stress. 2021, that percentage went even higher. So when we're talking about the impact of stress in the workplace, 76% of people report at least one symptom of a mental health condition during the last year, up from 59% in 2019. 84% report at least one aspect of their workplace negatively affects their mental health. And then 50% of full-time employees in the United States have left a job to improve their mental health. So it's important to understand that not all of the stress is bad. There are benefits to the stress that we can use to our advantage. Stress will give us a burst of energy, and that energy helps to motivate people in challenging situations and find ways to adapt when the environment changes. We can use stress to tap into our creativity and solve problems. It can help us focus and remember things and complete tasks efficiently. Stress alerts our body to kick in our immune system. It can improve how your heart works and protect your body from infection. In fact, studies show that people who experienced moderate stress before having surgery are able to recover faster than people who had high or low stress levels. And so that moderate level of stress does help us with our immune system and recovery. Now, stress also activates our fight or flight response in dangerous situations, and it lets us know something feels unsafe and floods our system to prepare us to fight off an attack or flee a dangerous situation. So that can be helpful as well. And it can be important to know what is triggering our stress because it can come kind of in many different shapes and sizes. So there's positive stressors. And when we think of stress, one, like we already said, right, we often think of it as something that's negative, negatively impacting us, but we also think of it as the trigger being something that's negative. But stressors can be positive too. Getting a promotion can be stressful. It's exciting, but oftentimes it comes with more work or more responsibilities or maybe longer hours. Having to learn a new job, that all can be stressful. Buying a house. Anyone that has bought a house knows how stressful it is. Or getting married, right? This is positive. We can be excited about getting married and still have a lot of stress over making that commitment. Having a baby, I mean, anyone with kids, I don't have to tell you. Weddings as well. So getting married and the marriage part can be stressful. Having to plan this wedding can be stressful. So can taking a vacation. Sometimes we need a vacation from our vacation because even though it's wonderful and we enjoy ourselves, all of the planning, spending of money, figuring things out, right? That can be stressful. So even when a stressor is a positive thing, we still need to find ways to cope with it. Now, other common stressors, not always so positive, could be being under a lot of pressure or facing big changes. And again, this could kind of go with some of the positive things we just talked about. Getting married, having a baby, promotion, those are big changes, and that can be stressful. Not having control over the outcome of a situation, that can be very stressful, and it is something that we experience often, right? There's a lot of things that go on in our lives that we're having no control over, and that can be hard. Having responsibilities that just feel overwhelming. And I guess some of this could be for positive too, right? The responsibilities, let's say, of planning a wedding can feel very overwhelming. Interestingly, and sometimes people don't think of this, not having enough work, activities, or change in our life can be stressful. Right? Maybe we're feeling bored, um, not very challenged, like we're not accomplishing things, and that can be stressful. And then, of course, times of uncertainty. Now, there is something that's called chronic stress. So, this is stress that continues on. Our body, like we talked about, our body is created to handle stress, but not for a long period of time. And so, chronic stress could be one singular trigger that goes on for a long time, or it could be multiple, kind of one after another. So as soon as one ends, another one seems to be beginning. And so chronic stressors could be something like having a loved one with cancer, having a lack of support system. or having a really high workload for an extended period of time. These are all examples of things that could be a source of chronic stress. And oftentimes, too, the person either doesn't know if or when this stressor, this challenge will end, or they can't even be sure that it will ever end. And so chronic stress can really kind of spread through our lives and often impacts things like our health, our relationships, home life, work performance, and happiness. And then there's also distant stress. And so this is a stressor that has happened in the past, but that has long lasting impacts, and so is still impacting us after time has gone by. So this could be things like child abuse, witnessing the death of a loved one, um, and something that has caused chronic stress for many of us, and in the future might be a distant stressor, is COVID. So, what is the impact of all of this for the workplace? And so, the US and Canada are home to the most engaged employees at 33%, um, which isn't all that high, right? But those two countries out of everywhere, it's most engaged. And despite what is considered to be a high engagement, both the US and Canada are also home to the world's most stressed out workers. 60% report feeling emotionally detached while at work. 19% consistently feel miserable. And working women in the United States and Canada are among the most stressed employees globally. So, whether employees are stressed because of the work or their stress is carrying over into work, one thing is clear: employees are feeling even more stressed than they did in 2020, which was the previous all time high. So, we did talk about those benefits of stress earlier on. And so, I think it's really important that we talk about the negative impact that stress can have on us. Stress becomes negative when a person faces continuous challenges without getting a break or a chance to relax in between stressful situations. And this is usually that chronic stress that I was talking about. Um, and so it can be one stressor that lasts for a long time, or it can be a bunch of shorter term stressors, one after another. And when stress continues and our bodies don't get a break, this can lead to a condition called distress, which is essentially a negative stress reaction. So, when our stress response is triggered for a long period of time, right? So we talked about that, the immune system and our fight or flight response, those kinds of things. When that's triggered for a long period of time, it causes wear and tear on our bodies and affects our physical health and our emotions. Our system gets overloaded and our bodies are responding. But our bodies are created to kind of respond to momentary stressors, right? We either fight it off, or we flee from it and now we're safe and we can kind of come back down. But that's not how our world works anymore. And so these stressors can go on for a long period of time, and the response system within our body is not built for that. So it is a really serious issue. Now, research is showing that stress can also bring on or make existing disease worse in the body. Stress is linked to 6 of the leading causes of death: heart disease, cancer, lung disease, accidents, cirrhosis of the liver, and suicide. So, next we'll look at the impact of distress. But before we do that, I'm going to check a few questions. So does the stress stay with a person all their life? Not necessarily, right? It's staying until the stressor or the effects of the stressor are gone. And so what I mean by that is we could have a stressor, let's say that maybe we lost our job. And now we found a new one. But the effects of that first stressor is that maybe we were behind in rent, or we're behind on the mortgage, or we're concerned about being evicted. So the stressor needs to be gone as well as the effects of it. Why do we think women are more stressed? At least in Canada and the United States, and it could be for a variety of reasons. But I think a big part of that is, many women have entered the workforce, for many, many years, but the household duties oftentimes continue to be their responsibility. So where, many years ago, it was very divided, you know, women stayed home, they took care of the house, they took care of the kids, and then the men went out and had jobs and worked and brought in the money. Um, for many people, it's no longer the case. Oftentimes, um, households are having to have two incomes. And statistics show there still hasn't been, kind of as a whole, individual, sure, but as a whole, there hasn't been much of a change in the responsibilities of the housework and the child rearing. So women are still doing everything they did before, plus having to work. How is stress different than tension? So, when we're talking about muscle tension, stress can cause that. It can contribute to it, right? The more stressed we get, the more we start to feel tension in our muscles. For me, it's oftentimes in my shoulder. When it starts to get worse, it's up in my neck. And oftentimes it gets to the point where it's so tight, it kind of wraps around my head and I get a headache right here. For other people, it's low back. And so stress absolutely can create some tension in our muscles. Great questions. So now let's talk about the impact of distress. So it can have a lot of impact on our body, both mentally and physically. High blood pressure can be the result of distress, that chronic stress reaction. Fatigue. This could be fatigue within our body, or our mind can feel fatigued. Indigestion and other stomach issues, muscle aches, headaches, right? And that was kind of that tension we were just talking about. Our muscles start to get really tight, and if you're tight up in your neck and shoulders area, oftentimes it can lead to a headache. We can see depression and anxiety, so it's not even just physical reaction in our body, but it's mental as well. Heart disease, sexual changes, sleep issues. Might see the inability to concentrate or finish tasks. Maybe getting sick more often. Right, so we talked about that early on, and I've kind of mentioned it. Right, part of that stress reaction is our body kicking in the immune system, right, and that's why a moderate amount of stress can help us recover from surgery. But our immune system is not created to be kind of kicked in and fighting things off constantly, and then it gets tired, and so we end up getting sick more often when we are under distress and we've been chronically stressed. We'll see existing health problems worsen, especially if it's an autoimmune disease that can be very triggered by stress. By seeing more irritability, changes in appetite, feeling more anxious or angry than usual. So when we're feeling this way, right, we start to try to find ways to not feel like it anymore. And so it can be very tempting to want to treat ourselves with our favorite unhealthy foods or buy something fun when we're under stress. The problem is that these things often make the situation worse, especially if we are overindulging in things like alcohol and drugs, too much food, too much shopping, too much gambling, too much time on the internet, right? It can make us feel better in a moment, but eventually it makes us feel worse about ourselves. We feel bad because we ate too much, We feel bad emotionally and we feel sick. Or we feel bad because we're low on cash because we either gambled it away or we spent it buying things that we don't have a budget for. And so I I will acknowledge that these things provide a short-term relief and a distraction. But they also keep the body in a stressed state and usually cause more problems. And so people get trapped in this vicious cycle where a stressful thing happens, they do a compulsive behavior to try to make themselves feel better. They feel better for some moments and then feel bad about the compulsive thing they did. So now they're more stressed and now they turn back to the compulsions. And so it just keeps getting worse. So these things, while it may feel good in the moment, don't provide relief long term and make things worse. Another thing that often happens but isn't helpful is avoidance coping. And so this just really involves trying to avoid stressors rather than dealing with them. And so this happens when a person kind of changes their behavior to purposely try to stop thinking about, feeling, or doing difficult things. And oftentimes people who struggle with anxiety, depression, distress, burnout can be really susceptible to this avoidance coping because at first this seems like a way to avoid thoughts and situations that make us feel bad. But unfortunately, that's not what happens. Avoidance can and really will make the anxiety worse because we still know the thing that we're avoiding hasn't gone away. And letting a problem go on for too long typically makes it worse. Avoidance can create conflict in a person's relationships, right? So if we're avoiding taking care of something, it can be in their work. And what we see is that the problems just kind of start to snowball. So an example, maybe you have a task at work. Maybe you're required to write up reports and they have a deadline, but you don't want to do them. They bring you anxiety, they bring you stress. So you put it off, put it off, put it off. And maybe you do it last second and you're stressed while you're doing it last second and you turn it in and it's not very high quality. Or maybe now you're behind schedule and your boss is mad and you've been written up. Or maybe when these reports are late, you have to write an extra report to explain why they're late. All of these scenarios indicate that putting it off makes us feel worse. So in this way, avoidance coping is just making the problems worse. Now, job burnout is a special type of work-related stress. It's physical and or emotional exhaustion. And it can impact a person's sense of accomplishment and identity. For example, maybe someone felt like they were really great at their job. They were a top performer on the team, but now because they've been overloaded with work or there's not the resources to complete their job, they feel like they're struggling to do their work, right? I was once able to do this and now I can't anymore. We're not looking at the fact that there's other things playing into this. When we start to feel bad that we aren't working to what we consider to be, our potential. And then we start to not like being there and we start to feel burnt out. So some things to ask yourself to determine if you're experiencing symptoms of burnout. Are you feeling cynical or critical at work? Do you drag yourself to work and have trouble getting started? Have you become irritable or impatient with coworkers and clients? Are you lacking the energy to be consistently productive? Do you find it hard to concentrate? Do you lack satisfaction from your achievements? Do you feel disillusioned about your job? Are you using food, alcohol, drugs, spending to feel better, or to simply not feel things at all? Have your sleep habits changed? Are you suddenly experiencing headaches, stomach problems, or other physical symptoms? So if you answered yes to really any of these questions, you might be experiencing job burnout or maybe on your way. And it's a good idea to talk with a doctor or mental health professional because these symptoms can also be related to other health conditions, or you might be feeling depressed. So I'm going to open up the chat real quick. Um, I'd love for you to share in the chat who either is experiencing burnout now or has experience in a job in the past. And can you share with us what led to being there? Right? For me, in a past job, it was kind of a cycle, right? They kept hiring new people. And as soon as that happened, the people that had been there longer were burnt out and they would go on leave. And so now the new people are overworked because we're now understaffed, and they deal with it and deal with it as long as they possibly can, and then they go out and it's just the next group is burnt out, and so it's just a cycle over and over. And I was one of them. I was the one that went out and just never came back. So some people are identifying that maybe they're adding to the burnout by overworking themselves. Understaffing, toxic management, too much paperwork, sure. Looks like limited staffing is a big one. Lack of boundaries, not putting ourselves first. And it can be so important when we're thinking about burnout. What are the things that we can change? Right? And it is setting those boundaries or putting ourselves first and prioritizing our mental and physical health. Oh, being the only one in the office and depending solely on volunteers. That had to have been so hard. Does the burnout continue if you change jobs? And not necessarily, right? We do oftentimes still need time to recover from that. But if going into a new job doesn't have the things going on that contributed to your burnout, you might most likely won't be feeling it again. But it's really important to go into a new job after you've been feeling that way in the last one with boundaries, right? Maybe you were staying late all the time and that really contributed to your burnout. Well, then we go into our next job making it clear from the beginning that I do not stay late. Vicarious trauma, taking work home, toxic work environment, caretaker burnout. Sure, that's a huge one. Not enough of communication, being dependent on other people to get our stuff done. So some people are saying, okay, how do I say no to additional tasks at work? And while it's not easy, right? And the thing is it one of the hardest places sometimes to set boundaries is at work because the majority of us are working because we have bills to pay, and without that job, we can't pay the bills. Right? So oftentimes it feels scary to set boundaries at work. But it is worth it. It is worth it. And oftentimes we will find that those boundaries can be respected. And so the other thing to kind of remember is when more and more is piled on you, oftentimes it's because you're kind of the easiest one to go to, right? You're the person that says yes. None of us like to be told no, of course, right? And so if I know that Jessica often says yes to me when I ask to get something done, I probably don't even realize how often I'm going to her. That's just the easiest solution. And so we ourselves have to stand up for ourselves. And so, your boss comes to you and you're like, here, this report needs to be done by 5 o'clock. And you can say, I'm happy to do it. I already have 4 things on my plate and I only have time to do 4 things today. So since I have 5 things now, which ones would you like me to prioritize? So we're not saying no, we're just making it clear that it is not time to get everything you've given me done. So indicate what it is that you want me to do, because I won't be doing all of it because I'm leaving on time. Right. And you don't have to add that last part, right? It's just that beginning of, okay, I have time for four. Which four would you like me to focus on? Thank you so much for sharing. It looks like there's so much burnout going on. And I know for many people, um, it got worse after COVID, right? Lack of resources, lack of staff, um, everyone kind of feeling stressed out. If you're working with public, oftentimes they're maybe a little less nice than they used to be. All of these can contribute. If you work in a space where you're, dependent on government or grant funding, a lot of that is harder to get now. And so there could be lots and lots of reasons why we're experiencing this. And so just know you're not alone. And I think based on how many people were in that chat, it's very apparent that you're not alone in this, and not that we wish anyone else to be stressed and burnt out, but it can be helpful to know that we're not alone in these things. All right, before we get going, I'm just going to answer a couple questions. Is isolating yourself a form of avoidance coping? It can be if you are supposed to be connecting with people, to get the job done or whatever it is. Right? So we are avoiding connecting with the people that we need to connect with to get the work done, by isolating ourselves from them. So someone asked, well, can't avoidance be healthy, right? We're avoiding toxic people. Sure. What I'm talking about here is we need to get something done. We recognize it needs to be done and we avoid it because doing it feels like it would bring on too much anxiety or too much stress. All right, so let's talk about the causes of job burnout, and all of you listed lots. And so this is going to sound familiar. But it can be extremes of activity. So when a job is constantly needing, you know, all of our energy because it's chaotic, because there's so many things that need to be done, that can lead to burnout. But interestingly, so can be a job that's really monotonous, that's really boring, that doesn't have enough going on, because it takes a lot of your energy to stay focused. And so this will lead to fatigue and job burnout. So it's not only having too much to do, it's not having enough. Lack of control can lead to burnout. Not being able to influence decisions that affect your job, like your schedule, your assignments, your workload, can lead to burnout. So can not having the things that you need to be able to complete your job. Unclear job expectations. If you're not clear about what you're supposed to be doing and you maybe don't even have much authority over it, or you don't know what is being expected of you, this can feel incredibly uncomfortable. Maybe the workplace is dysfunctional. Maybe there's a bully, or you feel undermined by colleagues, or your boss micromanages your work. This contributes to job stress. Or a lack of social support. If you feel isolated at work or in your personal life, you might feel more stressed if you're lacking that work-life balance. If your work takes up so much of your time and effort that you don't have the energy to spend time with your family or friends, you're going to burn out quickly. So the best protection against stress and starting to feel burnout and all of these things is to learn what our bodies need. So we want to check in with our body, right? Sometimes we aren't registering how much stress we're under, but our body is telling us. So a big piece of this is paying attention to our breathing, right? Am I breathing from up in my chest or down in my belly, right? If we are breathing from our chest, that indicates stress. Whereas belly breathing happens when we're calm and relaxed. Breathing from our chest is shorter, it's quicker, and it's not oxygenating our body as well. Our Is our jaw clenched? Our shoulders up here? Our lower back hurting? Do we have headaches? Are we getting sick more often? Is our sleep changed? Maybe it's too much, maybe it's too little. Digestive problems, overeating comfort food. All of these things are telling your body's telling you that something's wrong, and we need to stop and listen. We need to pay attention to our body so we can make adjustments when we're getting too stressed. And this can help us recover faster with fewer negative consequences to our physical and mental health. And another important piece of this is that emotional intelligence for recognizing what's going on for us. Being able to recognize an emotion as it happens is really important. Mental health people, call this developing self-awareness, right? So if you're self-aware, you can see your own patterns of behaviors and motives. You know how your emotions and actions impact those around you, for better or for worse. You can name your own emotions when they come up and understand why they're there. You can also recognize your triggers, identify your strengths, and see your own limitations. Once you're aware of your emotions, you can work on regulating them. If you can self-regulate, your emotional reactions are going to be in proportion for the given circumstance. Right? You know how to pause as needed and control your impulses. You think before you act and consider the consequences. It also means you know how to ease tension, manage conflict, cope with difficult scenarios, and adapt to changes in your environment. It's all about bringing out the part of yourself that helps manage emotions. So instead of avoiding difficult feelings, give yourself time to sit with the feeling. Really think about it. We have to pay attention to our emotions so we know when we need to make a change, right? The saying of, we got to name it to tame it. And so something that can help us be more aware of how we're feeling is self-monitoring. So we're paying attention to our breathing. Are we breathing quickly from our chest? These are signs of stress. What's our posture and our muscle tension like? We want to make a deliberate attempt to pay attention to how we're feeling throughout the day. Do you notice certain feelings or behaviors in response to the stress? Maybe you forget to eat lunch or drink some water when you're super stressed. It can also be helpful to make an emotional thermometer like you see on the screen. And what we're doing is based on different colors, that's different emotions or where we are in this kind of hierarchy. And for some people, green is calm and blue is lower, so it's depressed. Some people start at green. Red is kind of where we're trying to avoid being in kind of that anger zone. And so on one side, you write, what are the thoughts and feelings and behaviors I show when I'm in this area? The other side is, what can I do to bring myself back to green? And you can check this throughout the day to know where you're at and if you need to do something to intervene before you get to red. You can also make use of technology, different apps. Maybe you start to skip workout routines when you're stressed, and you can start tracking those. And then you notice, well, I haven't gone in 2 weeks. That's really an indicator that something's going on for me. Also, knowing what your triggers are. Maybe bright light stresses you out. And for part of your job, you've got to drive, and the sun is going to be glaring in your eyes today. We can do a couple of things. One, maybe you have the flexibility to kind of change around the workday, and you take that drive a little bit later when the sun is starting to go down. Or you come prepared, right? Sunglasses, visor, something to drink to calm yourself down, music you like, right? We're doing this to avoid feeling irritable and maybe driving aggressively in traffic, for example. All right, so next we'll talk about the practical steps to manage stress. Before we do that, I'm just going to check a couple questions. So someone asked for females, how do we say no without being perceived negatively? And for in some situations that can be hard, but the more we do it, the easier it gets. And the other piece of it too is we cannot control how people perceive us. All we can do is do what's right for us. And what's not right for us is saying yes when we really want to say no. And so, something that can be helpful when you're struggling with no is to start actively responding to requests by saying, you know what, I'm going to have to think about it, but I'll get right back to you. And then you can work on your reaction, right? Do I want to do this or do I not want to? And it gives you time to formulate that. And so maybe a friend has asked to go out, or maybe they've asked you to babysit, or maybe at work, a coworker has asked you to fill in for them. All these things you want to be able to say no to. And so what you can say is, and this is for anyone, not just females, I thought about it, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to say no this time. I don't have the emotional energy that your request deserves. I don't have the finances. I don't have the time. Whatever it is you don't have that it deserves. So we're not making up an excuse. Oh, I can't babysit this Friday on biz day. Oh, well, what about Saturday? Right? Because the answer was actually no. We just made up an excuse. We just say, I don't have the time, the energy, the finances, the whatever that your request deserves. How often should we have vacation? Well, you're asking the wrong person because I'd say all the time. But time away from work is important in making sure that you are using that paid time off that you're getting if that's something that you find from work. We need time away to be able to de-stress. And the frequency of needing days away from work is really going to be dependent on your stress level. But we can also do it in a preventative way, right? We're taking time off to prevent us from getting overly stressed and burnt out. All right, so let's talk about different ways that we can start reducing our stress. So we start the day right. If we're stressed in the beginning, we oftentimes are stressed throughout the day. So set things out before bed the night before so you're not rushing in the morning, whether it's your outfit, packing your work bag, whatever that is. And then make a morning routine where you're prioritizing taking just kind of 5 minutes to relax. It's either right after you wake up or maybe first thing when you're arriving at work, but you're maybe in the parking lot still. Right? We're just kind of giving us 5 minutes to kind of center ourselves and be ready for the day. A warm drink in the morning, tea, warm lemon water can really boost our body and kind of give us just that little extra energy in the morning. And just know that there's things that can influence your attitude. We're kind of, you are what you think, right? So think about it, list out, the things that make you anxious, that anger you, that annoy you, and notice how you feel when you do that. And then do it with things that you love, people that are important, something that makes you smile. And we can notice how those different thoughts impact our body and work towards starting our day with that positive attitude. And so a factor that can contribute to our job burnout is when a person's job expectations aren't clear, like we talked about. So if you find yourself feeling unsure if what you're doing is enough, it can help to have a meeting with your boss and talk about expectations. And once upon a time, it was believed that multitasking was a way to get things done and maximize our time, but more research has helped us understand that it impacts our speed and accuracy, and splitting our focus can leave people feeling tense and agitated. So we want to do chunking instead, where we do a group of things all at once. So from 9 to 10, I check my email. From 11 to 12, I make return phone calls. Then I have lunch, and then, 1 to 2, I do this, right? And so we're doing it in chunks instead of being constantly distracted. We also want to prioritize what we need to work on, and avoid procrastinating. Avoid that. Avoidance coping is just going to make everything worse. We want to stay organized so we can keep on track. And finding an organization manner that works for you is really helpful. And if you're in a workspace, or even if you're working from home and you're struggling with that organization, asking your coworkers what they do that works for them. And we want to understand that not everything can be done perfectly every time. I mean, it really can never be done perfectly. And perfectionism is just kind of a trap. So we want to do our best, but you have to add this part in: doing your best with the circumstances and limitations you have. If work is not giving you the resources you need, your best work is not going to be the level you've seen before. It's the best you can do under the circumstances and limitations they are imposing on you. And then be choosy about what you take on. Right? I have this amount of time to accomplish things, and you also gave me this priority project. There's not enough time for both. Which would you like me to focus on? Or is there something that you can take off of my plate? We want to try to stay away from conflict, right? We're avoiding the people that don't work well with others. We're not joining in on gossip. We're being careful with our sharing our opinions on kind of sticky subjects, avoiding colorful office humor. We want to avoid those things. We're staying away from it. But having a conflict is normal, and it can lead to some pretty positive things. And so what we want to do is recognize that when maybe we're having a disagreement with a coworker, that both of you just really want to feel understood. And oftentimes we both want to be the one that's understood first. But to make this interaction easier and more beneficial for you, you can be the one that goes first. Please tell me what it is that you're thinking so I can better understand. Right? We have no control over other people, but we can control ourselves. And we can be the first person that listens. And we listen to understand, gain confidence in their interaction, and learn more than we knew before, while developing stronger connections with others. And hopefully we can walk away from this, one, feeling even more comfortable with our colleague, but two, having a solution, some kind of compromise that helps us move forward. Take a break, simple things that kind of just help us relax our minds, being out in nature. So getting outside, and this can be so good outside, especially if you have a green space outside of work. It's great because you are physically moving your body. If you're walking around, getting fresh air, you're getting sunshine, you're getting nature, you're often getting interactions with other people and possibly interactions with animals. Right? So taking a walk outside is something that can be so beneficial, and it hits so many of these areas. Aromatherapy can be helpful. So having something near you in the office that smells good, lemon, smell of cookies baking, anything you enjoy. Journaling can be really helpful. We can do gratitude journaling, where we end the day sharing what we're grateful for. And grateful doesn't have to be happy, right? We can be grateful for a challenge we got through. Music and singing can be helpful. There's actually a tiny little organ in our ear called the sacculus, which responds to the frequency created by singing. And so the body's automatic response makes us feel good when we sing. And this is regardless of how you sound when you're singing. Art can be really helpful as well. And it can be something as simple as colored pencils and paper, sketchbook. You don't have to be great at it for it to benefit you. Make sure your space is comfortable, right? So the lighting is comfortable. Any kind of noise that can be distracting is gotten rid of. Your chair is comfortable. This can really stress us out, can lead to burnout. So get that comfortable space. Then start moving your body. So we talked a lot about those walks. right? Could be just walking around the hallway if you need it, but also stretching. We can stretch in our chair if we can't even get away. It can be helpful to get out of your chair and stretch, but it doesn't have to be this big change of your life. And some organizations are starting to offer yoga after work or Tai Chi, but even if they don't, you can do it on your own, whether it's at home or on your break or in your office, real quick. We want to calm our nervous system. So we're practicing that breathing. We're watching our breath. We're not chest breathing. It does not oxygenate our blood well. We want to be breathing from down in our belly. It's deeper and it's slower. We want to stay focused on paying attention to what's happening right now instead of trying to be focused on the future and the anxiety that brings. And so there's classes on mindfulness and meditation, or just free videos on YouTube that can teach you about it. And spirituality can be helpful. For some people, this is a form of religious observance, but it doesn't have to be for everyone, right? Spirituality could be in nature or music or art. It's different for everyone, but the benefit is the same, right? It gives us a sense of purpose, a connection to the world, and feeling less alone. It releases control. When we feel part of a greater whole, we realize that we're not responsible for everything that's happening in life. And then guided imagery. This is my favorite. So we can focus deeply in a relaxed state on an image or a scene that's relaxing. So maybe you've got a picture of the beach from your last trip. And you can do your own self-guided imagery where you're trying to focus and remember that and remember what it smelled like and felt like. Or there's scripts you can listen to. Lots on YouTube. My favorite is the channel is by Michael Sealey. He does a great job with his guided imagery. I often listen to it before I go to sleep when I'm struggling to fall asleep. And I've never finished the whole thing because I fall asleep first. So it definitely works. All right. And so I know that was tons of information, but here's even more. Okay, so if you want more information on stress and burnout, here's some additional resources. We'll make sure you get all of this in that email we send out tomorrow, as well as in the chat for you now. And that's the same with our crisis resources. So if you or someone you know are in crisis, need some support, these are different numbers that you can contact to make sure you're getting that support, that there's someone to listen to you, to be a support system, to offer resources and options. All this will be in that email we send out tomorrow and in the chat for you. And here's our upcoming webinars. Just a reminder, tomorrow's Wednesday. Wednesday's double feature day, and our earlier webinar is new, the connection between substance use disorders and mental illness. Later in the day, we'll talk about I don't need help, supporting people who can't see their mental illness. We'll make sure you get links to all of these in the email we send out and then the chat so you can get registered. Take a look at our upcoming webinars, and while you do that, I'm going to answer maybe one more question. So someone shared that they're really burnt out, they're struggling. When do we know when we need therapy? Therapy is good at any time. My recommendation would be to start therapy before we are overly stressed and burnt out, but that's not always the case. So if you answered yes to those questions about burnout, if you're feeling it in your body, if you're crying before you go to work, right? All of these are indicators that you are overly stressed and therapy can be helpful. If you need any more information, head on over to our website, mindspringhealth.org. You can find us on social media, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Mindspring Info, or LinkedIn at Mindspring Mental Health Alliance. You can also send us an email at info@mindspringhealth.org. And in case you missed it in the beginning, let's go over our frequently asked questions one more time. This has been recorded, and everyone who registered for today's webinar will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording in it. Also in that email will be all of the resources we talked about today. No slides will be sent out, and CEUs are not provided for community education webinars. What we do provide are certificates of attendance once you've completed your post-webinar survey. So my goal is that everyone leaves here feeling like they learned something, and this survey lets me know if you reach that goal. The organizations that support our webinars want to know how their donations are used and what communities participate. And this data is randomized, it's confidential, no one's demographic information is shared. So everyone that registered for today's webinar and joined us during the live session will receive an email from certificates@mindspringhealth.org soon after the webinar ends. Complete the survey within 48 hours to receive your certificate. And even if you don't want that certificate of attendance, we'd love for you to complete the survey. Your participation helps us to continue to offer these free webinars. Thanks so much for joining me today, and hopefully I get to see you tomorrow for both webinars. I will see you then. Bye.